Hi, Blastpop here. Today, we're taking a look at Death Valley, Battles for the Shenandoah, part of the Great Battles of the American Civil War series. Series designer, the late Richard H. Berg. Game designer is Greg Laubach. This is a continuation in a long series of games whose origins go back to Terrible Swift Sword by SPI in 1976. Through the various years and publishers, the system has become heavily modified, and while a regimental combat system for the American Civil War, the games included in this series don't really share as much design elements from that 1976 game, but you can definitely see the roots traveling from game to game and publisher to publisher until this is the latest variation of that series. Included by GMT is a 3-inch box, one of their super duper hard boxes that should hold up for storage purposes very well over time. And here you can see a sample of one of the maps, to give you a sense of the artwork on the map, a little bit of history, and further some samples of game counters and game information, or their game meter, that it's high complexity on the lower end of high, and it's high solitaire suitability. Very nicely done. Included, this is the first time I recall this, are 2 trays of the GMT type included in the box. And what's nice is, in addition to giving you something useful, it's a lot better than the cardboard inserts that GMT has been including the last few years on a number of their games, because not only is it usable, but it also prevents items in the box from moving around during shipment. Very nicely done. They're 2-piece with a plastic clear cover so you can see what's in them, and then the base where you put the units or counters in the bins. You have a series of Rulebook, the 2019 edition, and weighs in at 40 pages, including cover and any illustrations. While the text is fairly dense, it's 2-column. I won't go into the details of looking so much what is in the system, in terms of how the game is played. But it's fairly dense. Changes from from their previous version are shown here with the little mini ball. And there's some illustrations peppered throughout the rules book. Not complex stuff if you've had some more gaming experience. Nicely done, clear, crisp. Nice illustrations here as an example of movement and reaction. It will take some effort to learn this, but shouldn't be too terribly difficult. Units are leaders, infantry, artillery, cavalry, and then the examples and what those items mean are shown right there. Further, you've got 2 scenario books, or battle books as they term them, one from 1862 and 1864. So it gives you all the information you need to know for those battles, so you can say focus on the 1862 or 1864, not even have to touch the other book until you're ready. This one comes in at 24 pages, and the battles in this are small, and they show some samples of the counters for the 1862 game, so that if you should lose one. The battles are somewhat smaller in the valley than they are in the main Eastern Theater or out in the West. So these are ideal games to be played if time is a concern, you're learning the system, or you just want to play something smaller and don't want the long time commitment, as some of the bigger games in the series, such as ones on Gettysburg and Chickamauga. They have the special rules for 1862 built in, and the setups, for instance, like Kernstown, it's rather few units right here and here, so the setup time is quick. There's variations as well for each of the battles, so that's kind of nice. You got Kernstown 1 and Kernstown 2 in the series, Winchester, Cross Keys, and Port Republic, and you also have 3rd Winchester, Fisher's Hill, Cedar Creek, New Market among the battles. Now the 1864 follows much the same format, although the battles are somewhat larger, as you can see in the setup charts in the game, but nothing overly difficult, I would think. Very nicely done. This is an excellent package. Just pouring through it, there's so much in this package, it's incredible. So much value. Player aid card, there's 2 of the player aid cards, and that includes anything from your rally table, loose cannon, brigade orders, change table, brigade coordination table, range effects chart, fire table, the stuff that a lot of what you're going to be involved in is going to be right in this nice fold out 11 by 17 cardstock chart booklet, and your shock resolution, all handily laid out and logically done so. The second one of the same. Then for each of the battles, for both players, we'll get to this first. You have your terrain effects chart, just 2 copies, 1 for each player, which is nice. And then it shows you illustrations of the terrain, the movement costs for the various types of units, the effect on combat for fire and shock, and whether or not it's blocking terrain for the purposes of line of sight. And then you have your second disorder table, which is sort of almost like a random events table, to see what happens when you go to the second disorder. Additionally, you have for each of the battles, for each of the players, you'll have the sheets that show the efficiency, your activation markers in a nice handy place, the turn record track, victory point track for each side. Very nicely illustrated. Nice cardstock. The only negative I might think of is they're a little bit slick. It may not be an issue, but units might slide, or markers might slide on this, but not a real concern. Very nicely done. Certainly adds to the immersion factor, I would think, with period drawings and illustrations. Just going through these kind of quick. Just stop if you want to look for more detail, and then resume. Now the counters, there's 7 counter sheets, and what they did, which I think is kind of nice, is for the combat units, for illustration purposes, 1, to find them, and 2, to keep them segregated if you're interested in the 1862, say, more than the 64 or vice versa. It tells you right here that these are the 1862 units. And being 1862 had less forces involved, essentially it's not much more than, you know, a sheet and a half of counters. So you can easily find them. They're thick brown core. They feel fairly thick. Very nicely done, very nicely illustrated. Standard type counters for the series. And continuing on to sheet 2. Some more Union troops. System markers. Now here you'll see the 1864. So forces from the 1864 battles are, the units for that are included here. And as you can see, there's a lot more counters here for 1864. The battles were bigger, there were more forces involved, and there were more battles included in this game. So for those reasons, you have more units. Sheet 6. I'm sorry, 5. These are your activation markers that you put on those cards that I showed you before. These are almost like popping out for the counters, so they seem to be well die cut as well. More system markers with some more unit markers, unit counters as well. And then finally, strength markers and breastwork markers for the entire system. Fairly standard materials here. Now, you get a whole boatload of maps. As you can see, there are several battles, and this first one is Cross Keys. Everything's back printed. So here you have another map, which is the New Market battle. Next is Port Republic, which is another small half-size map. Definitely smallish, which is nice at its place. The first Battle of Winchester. All various elevations, woods, streams, points of locations of interest. The Valley Pike. And the campaign, or both campaigns, were largely followed in good measure, for the most part, the Valley Pike. So in many of the battles, the Valley Pike is predominant because it was the main road and supply source. The other roads were dirt paths in comparison. Matter of fact, the Valley Turnpike was what they call the first paved road in North America, or what they call macadamized, which was a slightly different process than we use today, but with a similar concept in terms of being a hardened road. You have your Kernstown map here, which is both your first and second battles of Kernstown. Kernstown right there. It's a very pleasing, this one is a particularly pleasing map to look at. Also, while I have it here, 2 D10s are included, blue and gray. Nice touch. Flip this over, is the Battle of Fisher's Hill. This has got like 20 elevations. Some of them are fairly steep. They're probably a little hard on the video to see, but there are multiple elevation height increases in a few places especially up over in here. It's more of a set piece. The Union attacking the Confederates on Fisher's Hill. And then the Valley Turnpike. Going back to the Kernstown map there. Okay. Next we have the Battle of 3rd Winchester. Now there are a couple battles here that uses two maps that are to make a larger battle. So there are a couple fairly decent sized battles for those who want something a little more involved as well. They include two full maps. Anyway, this is the 3rd Battle of Winchester, which this video is being taped on September 20th, 2019. Yesterday, September 19th, this was the 155th anniversary of the 3rd Battle of Winchester. Again, the Valley and a railroad. The Valley Pike and the railroad. And then on this side is the Battle of Cedar Creek, which also is a two-mapper. Middletown. And the final sheet of maps is the second map of 3rd Winchester. And then finally, the other Cedar Creek map. I don't believe the 2nd Winchester's in this battle set, because if I remember correctly, it was more of a fighting retreat. I don't think there was much of a battle for that, if I recall correctly. So it's not included. Although some intrepid scenario designer might create that, I would imagine. Breast entrenchments. As far as storage encounters, it's nice that GMT included the trays. I'm not sure how I'm going to store my units at this point, or even if those are sufficient, which I have my doubts, to hold all the counters. So, just looking back here at all the components included, you get a boatload of components for your money. Incredible value, I think. GMT really went out of their way in the production of Death Valley, Battles for the Shenandoah. Please comment, like, and subscribe. This has been Blastpop. Bye.